strikes on Ben Rice. At the knees for strike three called.
Hello and welcome to Fired Up Friday. Apparently, I'm not fired up enough to even remember the name of my segments. But hey, welcome to the Friday edition of the Woodshed Sports Report. I'm your host, Conrad Wood. And boy, oh boy, has it been a interesting tale of two series in the West and Eastern Conference. We've had a few bloopers in the MLB that I'm sure I'll talk about here today. But of course, we are going to start, as we have started every show since the beginning of the show, with the playoff breakdown in the NHL. Obviously, the biggest event going on right now, and as I've said, it hurts me to have to cheer for Vegas because of draft pick reasons, because hey, we're already getting a bottom 4 pick in the NHL, so Vegas might as well go all the way to give us an extra first round when maybe their inevitable fall off happens. But we will start in the Western Conference because it was the first series to start back on Wednesday when the Vegas Golden Knights came away with a 4-2 win. Of course, it was a game without Mark Stone and a game without Cale Makar. So how did both teams adjust to missing a pair of stars? Well, it was that feeling out process in the first period with only 10 shots apiece, but none finding their way past the Woods. Of course, I'm just going to refer to the Avalanche goaltenders as the Lumberjack duo. Of course, it was Scott Wedgwood in game 1. But finally, Wedgwood was beaten midway through the second. Dylan Coughlin, who has not scored, so he gets his first of the playoffs to open the series. The trailer on that rush assist to Brendan Saad and Colton Sissons. And I'm not going to lie, I thought Brendan Saad had retired from hockey, but no, he's just in exile in Vegas. Then a penalty taken just a few minutes after. Vegas gets that slingshot to open up. Good individual effort by Mitch Marner, drops it back to Pavel Dorofeyev. He finds the net. His 10th goal of the playoff and 12 assists for, oh, Mitch can't play in the playoffs. So, okay, Toronto, you tell yourself whatever you want. Yeah, it really has been the coming out show for Mitch Marner as we're proving all the doubters in the six wrong and proving that, hey, I didn't need Austin Matthews. I could get it done myself. Maybe it was the pressure of playing for your hometown team that was a little bit too much. Then just off a block shot at the end of the penalty kill, Brett Hutton gets it over to Brent Howden, and Howden makes no mistake as he's in alone. Just unfortunate there to have the shot blocked, just bounce directly onto Hutton's stick as he's getting out of the box. Bounces it off Wedgwood, rebound goes right to Howden. 3-0 for Vegas. Val Nichushkin made a game of it. Good interception by Ross Colton in front of his own net. He headmans the puck, gets it, or it was Nichushkin who gets it out, passes it over to Ross Colton, back to Nichushkin, into the back of the net. Only the second goal of the playoffs for Val. And then it's Gabe Landeskog on the power play. Of course, this has kind of been the story of the Avs, unable to score on the power play in the regular season. Of course, they were 6-on-4 here. Great pass by Nate McKinnon to get it over to Gabe Landeskog, his fourth of the playoffs. But it was the empty netter from Nick Dowd at 19:15 that would ice it. Good hard work there as Colorado figured, oh, they're tired. They're just going to go get the icing and take a breather. But Nick Dowd races it down, pots it home. Vegas takes the early Game 1 win in Colorado. So, of course, obviously, talk about how this affects the Flames. Remember, as part of the Rasmus Anderson trade, the Flames are getting next year's first from Vegas. In addition, they also get a 2028 second-round pick. Of course, if Vegas goes on to the Stanley Cup Finals, raises the cup again this year, which I'm just getting sick thinking about because of who's on this team. But regardless, it's it would bounce that pick up to another first round pick. That would be, I believe, is this year is Gavin McKenna's draft year. Next year is Landon DuPont, so that would be, who's the big prospect in that? My brain is not functional today. Is that the so that would be the 28. I think that's the Maddox draft. Maddox Schultz and Liam Pugh. Of course, that would be that draft here. Hey, if you can get a couple of early draft picks in that 2028 draft, you're getting some of the best Central Canadians to ever been produced in this country. Or knowing the Flames are just going to draft Cruz Jim because he's a Alberta prospect. But hey, none of you guys out there likely know any of these names. If you want to know the next generation of hockey, Circle K Classic. But Vegas taking, I wouldn't say a stranglehold of the series, but I think it is going to be a challenge for Colorado in how are you going to shut down Mitch Marner without Cale Makar? Because he has been the straw that stirs the drink for Vegas, along with Jack Eichel. it's going to be a struggle, especially Brett Burns does not necessarily have the foot speed anymore to keep up with Mitch Marner. It's going to be tough. Like looking at this, like the replacement that you brought in was Jack Aiken, and Jack Aiken played 7 minutes and 34 seconds. Like, are you just going to have to try and hope Sam Malinsky is your answer? As you're playing Devin Toews nearly a full 30 minutes, half a game, when you're able to line match. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting series, and not a great performance from Wedgwood, an .889 save percentage. Of course, there was the empty netter as well. .947 for Carter Hart. As I throw up in the back of my mouth a little bit, thinking about what he did. But that's all for Game 1 of the West. Of course, Game 2 goes tonight, again from Colorado. I don't want to call it a must-win for the Avs, but they certainly would like to go to Vegas, at least putting it back to a best-of-5. But let's head over to the East, where a lot of people are thinking, oh, Carolina's going to play the absolute minimum games required in this playoffs. They're just going to walk through Montreal. They've already beaten 2 people and not allowed more than 6 or allowed more than 5 goals in a series. Montreal heard that and said, hold my drink. Of course, only 33 seconds in, and the Habs were down. After 12 days of rest, Carolina get an offensive zone faceoff, win it, good hard work. Svechnikov gets it off the boards to Seth Jarvis, and Jarvis makes no doubt about that one. As he kind of just loops all the way around, finds a soft spot in the Habs defensive coverage. Slots that one home only 33 seconds in. But not to be outdone, Montreal, they lose the opening draw, but head back in their own zone. Get it back down, and good hard work pinching it back out to Cole Caulfield after losing the puck below the goal line. Goal Caulfield all alone out front. 1 minute in, we've already got a 1-1 hockey game. Assists to Slavkovsky and Suzuki on that one. As I said, just good hard work down below the goal line. And then it was Philippe Danault. The Habs winning a faceoff deep in their own zone. Alex Carrier chips it up the boards. Danault streaks in and beats Freddie Anderson glove side. 2-1, les Habitants de Montréal. And then Alexander Texier. The Habs just not allowing any space for these Habs. I don't think the Hurricanes were necessarily anticipating as much of a forecheck pressure as they were getting. Just absolutely harassed. Goulet gets the interception at the blue line. Danault finds Texier. And Texier with the quick release beats Anderson. And they weren't done. Still in the first period again. The Habs transition proving difficult for the Hurricanes as Ivan Demidov is sent in all alone off the pass from Jake Evans. And Demidov makes no mistake. Beats Anderson, and oh boy, it was 4-1. And I thought at this point you might have seen Anderson get pulled. Of course, I thought it wasn't even going to be Anderson to start the playoffs, because it had been the story of Brendan Bussey, the rookie, who had come in and won at 31 of his 39 games through the regular season. But he did only have an .895, so maybe you're having a little bit more confidence in the veteran there. And hey, they'd been rewarded thus far. But, of course, I'm not a coach. I'm not the one in charge in Carolina. And it was, in terms of shots on goal, only 13 for Montreal, 14 for Carolina. Montreal didn't get a ton of shots from here on in. It was a lot of play controlled by the Hurricanes, and it was Eric Robinson. His first goal of the playoffs after Cole Caulfield rings one off the post, and Robinson just kind of gets lost in the long line change. Makes no mistake, beats Jakob Dobesh on the far side. Assist Will Carrier, both of their first points of the playoffs. Hey, you've only played 8 games. There's going to be some people who haven't got points. And that was a time for a little bit of live/love. Long breakout pass finds Nick Suzuki. He drops it off for Slavkovsky. And for a guy that big, he shouldn't have that good of hands. Gets around the Carolina defender and tucks it home. Like, of course, he was all alone for a long time. Just kind of had the Canes dancing around. But 5-2 for the Habs. Canes threw everything they had at the Habs. Pulled the goalie early. And Uri Slavkovsky gets his second of the game into that empty net. Not getting that automatic goal this time. But 6-2 for the underdog Habs. Like, a couple of nice goals, but a couple of times the Canes got lost in transition. And that is the difference between the Habs and any of the teams that Carolina has faced to this point. Like, Ottawa was a stout defensive team who could score in bunches, use the special teams. Philadelphia, they were a young team, but they aren't necessarily as strong on the transition. They're more a established zone time and just use the elite tier shooting that they have to create goal scoring opportunities. The Habs are quick, young, and feisty. They use it to their advantage there, and as many people are saying, this is a game the Habs need to win. It is that rust versus rest argument, and I would have to say the Hurricanes, hey, they came out of the blocks with a bang, but maybe didn't have the runner's legs from being off for 12 days between series. And hey, the Habs have played the absolute maximum games to get to this point. So the fact that they've won game 1 puts them on track to, hey, if they have to, they have the early advantage. Of course, Carolina more than likely will come back in game 2 after taking that first punch. It's a boxing analogy. Got to take a punch to give a punch. Who knows if that's going to prove to be true, but you have to think that's got to be the mentality of the Hurricanes and Rod the Bod. Yeah, we've seen what we're up against now. We understand it. Now it's the chess at 100 miles an hour. How do we come back, not allow those transitions? How do we change our fate? Of course, that leaves us with the game tonight. The Golden Knights, can they continue their winning ways? Or will Nathan MacKinnon lead his troops to making this a 5-game series? Of course, it's at 8 p.m. Eastern puck drop. You can watch here in Canada on CBC or Sportsnet or TVA Sports en français. Because this takes me to what my bracket challenge looked like. Because I am in one of the bracket challenges. And my bracket that I submitted for all of them was the same. My Stanley Cup final, of course, I'm not going to show it because a lot of my early round predictions were completely wrong. But hey, I had Colorado against Utah. Hey, at least I picked the right series in the West. But in the East, I had this Montreal-Carolina matchup, and I had Montreal advancing to lose to the Colorado Avalanche. The all-Quebec former matchup. But we'll have to see where we go from here. Because where the Habs are looking great, the Avs need to find a way to beat this high-octane Golden Knights team who are rounding into form at the right time, even without their captain. But of course, that's not the only major hockey tournament going on. Of course, there is the World Cup of Hockey, which I haven't covered at all on this show. But it is the Memorial Cup taking place starting today. The field consists of the host Kelowna Rockets, who did put kind of an interesting spin on hosting this year, because in their arena they only have 2 league-worthy dressing rooms. So what they did is they did a $1.1 million I want to almost call it the portable schooling that a lot of us here in Alberta had, where it's the portable that's outside the school. But yeah, you're right next to the school, generally right next to the playground. Yeah, you're part of the school, you're just in the portable. Yay, how fun is that? So they've got this $1.1 million set of 3 locker rooms. Of course, they aren't just using them for this event. They're also using them for when the BC Lions head out to the Apple Bowl to expand there. Hey, maybe they'll stay there for the Canadian Premier League potential expansion coming to the Okanagan Valley. And then one of them is being converted into kind of a public event space. Going to use the washrooms as public restrooms, and then turn the locker room into just kind of an event space. Or hey, if it's somewhere with a public skating rink, maybe that's where you get your skates on to go play shinny. That's kind of how I foresee that. But that's so far away from the world of hockey that it's just kind of a fun little story. But of course, the Kelowna Rockets, the hosts, the Kitchener Rangers, the OHL champions, the Everett Silvertips, the WHL champions, and the Chicoutimi Seguin of the QMJHL. Told you I'd give you a bit of a breakdown of all of these teams, and I'm going to do that now. We'll start with the last team to qualify. It took the longest time to get there. The Chicoutimi Seguin, they are the hottest team entering the tournament. They finished near the top of the queue all year. They are a offensive pressure, transition speed team, and that is how they got through the QMJHL playoffs. They dominated the early rounds and beat the defending champion Moncton in 6 games to win the Gilles Contreau Trophy, ending a 32-year championship drought. Key players for this team is Maxime Massé, regular season scoring leader in the queue. Maverick Lachance has been massive in the playoffs. Lucas Beckman is the goaltender and stabilized that team. And Jonathan Tournier is a veteran bringing the playoff composure. High event hockey, very much that Q style of, we got a great goalie, so we just got to outscore you at all costs. However, the biggest concern that we saw in Moncton, which almost saw the Wildcats defeat them, is defensive game is pretty loose, and if you're against a more structured team, and there's a couple of really, really structured teams coming out of the West and Ontario, could see them maybe unravel a little bit. Kitchener Rangers are probably the most balanced roster, not really an elite forward game, not really an elite defense, but just good across the board. They had an elite OHL regular season and play fast but structured. And hey, one of the most stout penalty killing units you'll see in this Memorial Cup. They are a little bit older, and they're as I said, disciplined consistency. And with that, veteran squad becomes a little bit more composure. And so even when the games are close, didn't really look as rattled. They are going to be big and heavy on the forecheck with that layered defense and maybe the best depth across any of the teams. They can struggle a little bit because the foot speed isn't that great. So if they get in a running gun, can maybe struggle a little bit. but they might be the safest pick to win just because they are so good across the board. And the Everett Silvertips, they are the defensive nightmare. Their strength is on that back end, playing hard Western style hockey. Stingy defensively. Of course, they have Landon DuPont on the back end. Like, they had some excellent goaling and some really good blue line structure, and don't allow the high danger chances. So they're gonna try and beat you 2-1. They're gonna try and get that grinded out game, winning ugly when they need to. They had a tough road through the WHL, but that dense defensive identity was what led them through the dub. Hey, big, heavy, physical hockey sounds like a WHL team. Their biggest strength is that defensive structure and goaltending. But if they fall behind, coming from behind, especially in a tournament like this where it's not multiple games, it's a round robin, then a best of one, could potentially be a problem. But hey, nobody likes playing against the big heavy teams in that one and done setting. And the Kelowna Rockets, they're in as the host. They rebuilt relentlessly, really cost them a whole lot, but hey, they still got that first overall pick in the WHL draft. Got better as the season progressed. Obviously didn't do great in the playoffs. They have the high-end talent. They have guys like Tija Ginla on this squad. So it's a transitional based offense where speed is key. And I'm not just talking about that because I have Jacksepticeye stuck in my head. They are the wild card. The host team always has something to play for because they get the biggest fans out, just having the local fan base. But they are a inconsistent defensive team. And as I said, I think they called up someone from the CSSHL. I should have done this as part of my research. But so yeah, their primary goaltender is Josh Bonini. But they have called up Lyndon Sobakan from the Okanagan Hockey Academy to be the backup for the Mem Cup. You have to think that Bettinger may be hurt. That's their other goaltender. Or maybe they just want to have another guy in camp to press on those two older goaltenders. Or hey, this is a guy, our goaltender of the future. We just want him there with us at the Memorial Cup for next year. So your most complete team is Kitchener. Your best defensive team is the Silvertips. The Sagan have just finished their season, therefore are maybe coming in hot instead of rested. The Gamblers' chance goes to Kelowna, so you have to wonder what will happen. The Memorial Cup, always a fun tournament to watch. And this is an interesting mix. This isn't like in years past where you had Gavin McKenna to necessarily watch. That high-end draft guy rounding out the rosters. You have higher draft picks already. Guys like Tija Ginla. Guys that aren't drafted would include Igor Shilov out of Chicoutimi. Harrison Bodiger of Kelowna. However, sounds like he is hurt, so we might not see him. Maverick Lachance, also out of Chicoutimi, isn't universally regarded as a first-round pick, but you'll have to see if that changes. But it is kind of seeing those guys like Tija Ginla, Goshich, Maxime Massé, Carson Wetch. What are these guys going to do? Of course, Carson Wetch started with drafted by the Hitmen, was traded to Kelowna later in this season. So that's maybe a guy for more Calgary fans to watch. because he was traded for Ben Macbeth and a bunch of seconds, one in this recent draft and a fourth in the most recent draft, and a 2027 first round pick. So hey, if they're getting a first round pick for next year, good turnover there for the Hitmen, as they trade away their former captain. Yeah, it's interesting is you're not getting as many of these first time draft picks, especially hey, with a lot of them going to the NCAA. But you're seeing ones from years past. So that's the interesting part about the Memorial Cup this year. And I think that we'll do a little bit of a brief look in at the World Cup of Hockey. I know there is a game ongoing right now. Or I guess it's the Ice Hockey World Championship. Of course, the IHF website didn't let me save my cookies. Undergoing right now, it is 3-0 Sweden over Italy. Canada yesterday defeating Slovakia 3-1. For the Americans, we finally saw Devin Cooley go in against Italy, or against Great Britain, was scored on by Great Britain, which cool. So let's not allow goals against teams that are not necessarily at the level. But looking at the standings, Canada is the top of their group because they are 4 wins and an overtime win, with the goals for being 25-10. They're the one of 2 teams in their group to have played 5 games. Of course, the only other team is Slovakia, who has played 5. Then on the other side, Switzerland is currently at the top of their group. 5 regulation wins for the Swiss. Interesting to see that. USA is 1 win, 1 overtime loss. And hey, 2 losses for Team USA. Of course, those aren't on Devin Cooley, as he has only played the 1 game and come in relief. Tough for Team Great Britain. They have yet to come away with a win and have been outscored 19-4. And the Italians been outscored 17-2. The other team, one of the other teams, not put up a win. And Denmark outscored 20-5 with their 4 loss records. But of course, we have to look over at Team Slovakia, where it is the Pospisil brothers who are the straw that is stirring that drink. Of course, Martin and his brother Christian. And Marty Party doing pretty well. 1 goal, 3 assists, a point a game at the tournament, +2. And just always good to see Calgary players doing well in terms of doing their part for their national teams. Leading goal scorers in the tournament so far, 8 points for the pair of Sven Andrighetto and Timo Meier. Andrighetto 3 goals, 5 assists. Meier 2 goals, 6 assists. Followed closely by Lucas Raymond, 7 points. Top point getter for the Canadians is Max Celebrini with 7, 2 goals, 5 assists. Followed closely by Sidney Crosby. I know we talked briefly about this, how I felt the C should go over to Sid. Allegedly, Sid said no, let the kid have the captaincy. But for a guy that was a late tournament addition, 6 assists is really good for Sid. And a guy who I didn't necessarily think you would see up here. But 5 goals for Rudolfs Balcers of Latvia. Interesting name to see up there. Another guy that's producing well is Jesse Puljujärvi for the Finns. 3 goals, 2 assists. But there's a lot of guys on this list that aren't NHLers that are producing for their countries, like Rock Tigar. Guy that I'm shocked is producing as well as he is. Not a guy I necessarily had on my roster is Porter Martone. 1 goal, 4 assists for the Canadian. But yeah, it's always an interesting tournament, this World Ice Hockey Club or Ice Hockey World Championship. Of course, for the Canadians and the Americans, it can be a little bit of a broken roster. Like the fact that Devin Cooley is representing the U.S. for the first time in his entire career. Like that's pretty insane. And like when Justus Annunen is the starting goaltenders for the Finns, Arvid Soderblom for the Swedes, Jet Greaves for Team Canada. Like it's always an interesting tournament. And hey, I always am gonna have a little bit of a soft spot for Team Hungary. They've been a team that's come over to the Circle K Classic twice. I recognize a couple of these guys. Bence Horvath was here in Calgary. The 04 birthday. Martin Nemes. He was a absolute nemesis for a lot of teams at the Circle K. Cassandra Vasks. Zombor Garat. Like these are some guys that have come and played in Calgary. So super interesting to see that team. Obviously not one of the leaders, of course, only having 1 win thus far on the tournament. But always interesting to see. Canada not playing again until I believe tomorrow, if my calendar and brain are correct. In fact, not playing again until Sunday when they take on Martin Pospisil and Slovakia. So that will be it for segment number 1 of our show. 34 minutes of hockey talk. When we come back, we are going to do a little bit more of a Flames focus when we return here on the Woodshed Sports Report. Hello and welcome back to the Woodshed Sports Report with your host Conrad Wood. As we are going to look at a preview of how I foresee the Calgary Flames draft day to go. Of course, the Calgary Flames draft picks, they got a few of them here in the upcoming NHL Draft. So I'm going to try and figure out why my that's why. Trying to get my get this visible so we can see where the Flames selections lie. In the upcoming NHL draft. You know, if I was prepared, I would have had this all ready before the show, but you know, that would require me to let's see if this works. Okay, yeah. All right. Of course, things are breaking on my end, but you guys don't necessarily always need to see all that. But hey, on we go. The lovely joys of live production. All right, there we go. As good as we can get it. Of course, looking at Puckpedia here. Don't necessarily see the round 7 selection, which the Flames don't have. But the Calgary Flames have their own pick in round 1, and then Vegas's pick. As you can see here, the Flames the Golden Knights acquired Mikhail Vorobyov in exchange for this first pick. Of course, that's part of the double retention on Noah Hanifin. The Calgary Flames also have 4 second rounders. The New York one is from the Utah Mammoth when they acquired Mackenzie Weegar. So we've got the New York second and Utah's second out of that trade. Of course, we've got our own pick, and then we've got one from the Sens, which is part of the Mackenzie Weegar trade as well. And then this third round pick that you can see here, that is from the Nikita Zadorov trade that sent him to Vancouver for that short term. And the Calgary Flames do not have a 2027 7th round pick. It was traded to the Detroit Red Wings. So as you can see, that is how we line up this year in terms of draft picks. And it is kind of interesting where that leaves the Flames in terms of what's going to go on here as the draft becomes sooner and sooner. Of course, the NHL entry draft happening fairly soon as the playoffs come to an end. So let's talk a little bit about how the picks are looking before we get into any trade talk. This is the combination of Upside Hockey and the NHL combined central scouting registry. Gavin McKenna still at the top of most of the boards. So they've done a little bit of things here where it would equalize their points if every player played 68 games. So equivalency Height, weight, position, what they shoot, where they're from, and what league they were playing in. But you can only see some of that because of how I've had to crop things. Of course, Gavin McKenna, as I said, out of Penn State, is still at the top of the draft boards according to the NHL, as well as upside. Ivar Stenberg, still the consensus number 2, but this is where things begin to change up a little bit. I won't say they're weird and wacky, but just kind of opinion through the next, let's call it, 9 picks. NHL has bumped Chance Reed, even if I could speak the language that, I'm kind of paid to do. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to note that Reed coming up the draft board for the NHL, not as far up according to upside, but as I said, that's just this group's opinion. And then it is Carson Carroll's up at 4th overall. I know there was a lot of Flames fans that really thought Carson Carroll's would end up a Flame. But based on the fact that he's got and raised that far up both Upside's draft board as well as the NHL Central Scouting, not looking like Carson Carroll's will fall to the Calgary Flames. And a guy that's taken a bit of a tumble down some draft boards is Keaton Verhoff at the University of Notre Dame. 5th according to the NHL, 6th according to the Upside draft rankings. And as I've said, I don't think the Flames necessarily want to select a right-handed defenseman if that is where Verhoff falls. 6th according to the NHL Central Scouting is the other right-handed draft eligible defenseman in Daxton Rudolph out of Prince Albert. Albert Smits, who has been my selection for the Calgary Flames in its 7th. And then Caleb Malhotra, if he is still available when the Calgary Flames come to draft, that is my number 1 with a bullet hope for Craig Conroy. Of course, upside, and I've heard other teams that are, if it's not the Flames jumping up into 1, 2, or into that 2nd or 3rd pick, a lot of other teams are considering that selection. And there's also a lot of rumors coming out of Vancouver. That fan base loved Manny when he was there. If they could get the son of Manny Malhotra, I think there's a lot of Canucks fans who would be more than okay with that. And then it goes to Tynan Lawrence, who's ranked number 9 according to Central Scouting. Oliver Suvanto. I struggle with some of those names for some reason. The Finn in that 10th overall. But if you look, that's where the big deltas start to come in. The big differences between some of these draft aggregators / non-official scouts. Nikita Klepov out of Russia. I don't think the Flames are going to take another shot on a Russian, just because they've had a couple troubles getting some of the guys they picked out of Russia. Of course, with Klepov, that's not as big of a deal because he was in the OHL. Then you see Ethan Belschitz, Ilya Morozov. And also, Belchitz, I think, has a real strong possibility of being someone the Flames really like. Vigo Bjork, Ilya Morozov. Down at the bottom of your screen there. I'll scroll all the way down. But that is where their table ends for page 1. Because here's where my thoughts get a little interesting. Rated 30 according to NHL Central Scouting, but a mid-round pick according to Upside. Upside, not my favorite, but they're just one that had the nice head-to-head. And then Marcus. See, they have them both as mid-round picks. And that's an interesting proposition for me as a Flames fan. Should the Flames be trading down to, say, try and collect an 11th and a 12th overall pick? And maybe you use a trade chip with Dallas to get into that range. And maybe see if someone wants to trade into that 6th spot for a mid-first and another second round pick to try and get the Rucks back to back. Like, I don't think this is a Sedin situation with Vancouver where they mortgaged everything to get the Sedins, but I think if you can drop into that 15 area, go to one of these teams that was close to getting into the playoffs and say you were a Blake Coleman away. I'll give you a Blake Coleman and a third for your first and a fourth. Something along those lines. I don't think that's out of the equation here. And why am I saying Blake Coleman? He's the guy that I think needs to get out of town. With the most urgency. Like, he is a 2-time cup winner, playoff pedigree, and imaginable 4.9 cap hit through the next season. He's somebody that you can play in your second through fourth lines. He'll be a great matchup winger in the playoffs. One of the best penalty killers in the league. And hey, Calgary's reshaping. So let's talk about where I could see Blake Coleman fitting. Of course, he's been tied primarily to Dallas, the Texas Tiger. Going back down, what spot does Dallas what are their draft picks like? Because I'm not actually sure if they have their first overall this year. They don't. They traded that to New York. So, hey, never mind. Doesn't matter. Dallas does have a first overall in terms of this. Let's look at, or hey, who is a team that was probably thought they were close to competing? Columbus. You've got your first overall. Let's have that conversation at the 14th overall pick. Of course, I doubt that the Blues are going to move on from theirs. I doubt that the Capitals in that range. Los Angeles. You guys had a problem with defensive firepower in the playoffs. You know who can fix that? Blake Coleman. Real quick. 17th overall. Hey, Capitals, do you want to package up that 16th and that 16th overall pick? Move up. We'll figure it out. Give us 16. We want to be down there. We'll just take a couple of your futures. Just don't worry about it. Because you kind of bookend this pick, and hey, that looks like the Capitals could be looking for the Ruck Twins. Because they've got the 16th and 18th overall selections. So maybe you need to get in before the Capitals. But yeah, going to be interesting here for the Calgary Flames. Because there are lots of teams obviously of interest in Blake Coleman. Dallas is kind of the one that everyone looks to, but Dallas, as I said, their cupboards are pretty bare. Another team that could maybe see, depending on how this round goes, thinks that they're a pick or a piece away. Could the Flames lure another pick out of Carolina? Carolina, as we've seen, loves to forecheck. They've gotten beat on it a few times already in this series. And I think Blake is a Rod the Bod type of player. Or does Detroit finally get off the pot? Do they say, we've believed in our rookies, now we need to bring in a veteran or two to truly make a push? That's been one of the big criticisms of Stevie Y, so maybe he hears the bells calling for that. Let's see if they move a 2026 pick for Blake Coleman. The other one is, does he return to Tampa Bay? Do they think that they have one more kick at the can? However, the obstacle there is Calgary will have to retain. Does that drive the cost for Tampa Bay up? And the sneaky fit, if the Flames want to deal with them again, or if New Jersey more than likely wants to deal with Calgary again, after the Jacob Markstrom bill of goods that they've got, could you coax Blake Coleman onto that roster? Who knows? And the other thing that apparently is getting more and more steam is Kevin Ball's name being brought up. Not necessarily by Craig Conroy, but a lot of teams starting to kick the tires on the young left-handed defenseman. Is, hey, who doesn't need a giraffe that can actually play defense? Because it's truly becoming one of the more interesting stories in hockey is how much Kevin Ball has improved, where his next stop may be. Because if he is someone that is drawing lots of attention, that can probably drive up the value a little bit. Maybe get you a first and a prospect. Like, that's where the Flames are at, where if someone has value and the offer is right, I don't think Craig Conroy is in the wrong to at least take a listen. But we will have to see, and as I didn't want to say on Twitter, I do have a couple things to do. I have to head out to Okotoks. We're getting that season ready. Of course, first pitch of their season goes on Wednesday. That's an away game. First home game of the season for the Okotoks Dogs is next Thursday. So we'll have to see what if I change the schedule. I'll keep that. I'll keep you notified of that. But I have to head out. So thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. It has been a wonderful week after the long weekend. I will be back on Monday where we will have lots of NHL games taking place. Of course, just the one a day here in this round. Will Montreal continue their hot streak? Where will Colorado be when we rejoin each other on Monday after 3 games of their series? But once again, we will be back on Monday for the Woodshed Sports Report. My name's Conrad Wood. We'll see you on Monday.